Hello friends, welcome back to English Wala. Today's lesson is on the words of contrasts, the words and expressions of contrast. That means the words or expressions which are used to denote two contrasting ideas. And there, although, though, even though, but, in spite of, despite, and however. I sometimes find the learners are confused regarding where they should be used, when they should be used, and how they should be used. Now, I am going to discuss about their usage very elaborately. Please lend me your ears, eyes, and your mind. Now, let us see the words although, though, and even though. Let us see them individually. Although, what is although? Although means, if we break the term although, we get all plus though. And this very term was introduced during the Middle English period. It means in spite of something. It means in spite of something. Actually, although is a subordinating conjunction. It introduces a subordinating adverbial clause. That means a subordinating adverbial clause begins with although. Although itself is an adverb. So, although means all plus though in the Middle English. It means in spite of something. That means it gives a contrasting idea, and it is a subordinating conjunction. It works as a subordinating conjunction, and it begins an adverbial clause. The word although itself is an adverb. It works as the subordinating conjunction. Now let us see what is though. Though, the word though comes from the Old English word there. It means in spite of something. So, although means in spite of something, and again, though also means in spite of something. So, although means though. It is also, like although, a subordinating conjunction. It introduces a subordinating adverbial clause. That means it begins a subordinating adverbial clause. Like although, it is an adverb. So, although and though have the same meaning. Now, there are some points of difference regarding their usage. Though is more common than although. We frequently use though, rather more frequently use than although. Though is more informal than although. That doesn't mean that although is out and out formal. It is not informal. But though is more informal than although. That means in spoken language, while we speak, we generally use though. Though is more frequently used in speaking. Again, for emphasis, we get the expression even though. For emphasis, even is added to though. We cannot add even to although. That means we cannot say even although. We can say even though. Again, to give a possible explanation for something, as is added to though. We get the term as though, which means as if, to give a possible explanation. But we cannot use as although. Now the next point is very important. Though can be used at the extreme end of a sentence. For example, I couldn't find the book. I looked for it everywhere, though. We can say this. It is out and out colloquial. We cannot say, I couldn't find the book. I looked for it everywhere, although, no, although cannot be used there, but although cannot be used at the extreme end of the sentence. Now, there is even though. Even is added to though for the sake of emphasis or for a stronger contrast. Even though has the same meaning of though and although, but there is a difference in the usage. However, it is stronger, even though is stronger. When the opposing idea is stronger, we use even though and adds emphasis to the opposing idea. For a stronger and emphatic opposing idea, even though is used. So let us think about the trio. These three, the trio, although, though and even though. Although is a bit formal. Although is a bit formal. Though is more informal than although. And even though is emphatic and stronger than although or though. When the contrasting idea is stronger and when we want to give emphasis upon that, then we should use even though instead of although or though. Now examples. Let us look at the examples. I have used here though and although. There are two sentences. The questions were hard. I did well. These are two contrasting ideas because the questions were hard. But I did well. So we can join these two contrasting ideas with although. Although the questions were hard, I did well. Again, although can be used at the middle. I did well, although the questions were hard. The adverbial clause can be placed at the beginning, before the noun clause I did well, independent clause, and adverbial clause can be placed after the independent clause, I did well, although the questions were hard. Again, in place of although we can use though. Though the questions were hard, I did well. I did well, though the questions were hard. Particularly note one particular thing here. When the adverbial clause is placed at the beginning, after the adverbial clause, I have used comma. You can see here, again, although the questions were hard, a comma has been used. But when the adverbial clause is placed after the independent clause, there is no need of using the comma. I did well, although the questions were hard. I did well, though the questions were hard. Again, though can be used at the end of a sentence, but in that case, we cannot join the sentences. We must use the sentences separately, and the opposing idea will take though at the end. The questions were hard. Stop. Total stop. I did well, though. The questions were hard. I did well, though. It is out and out spoken form. We use it colloquially. But one mistake is done by the learners, by the second language speakers frequently. That is, the questions were hard, I did well, although cannot be used at the extreme end of the sentence. Though can be used. This is the biggest difference between though and although. Now, let us see the application of even though. The questions were easy. So, what was my expectation? The questions were easy and I expected that I would do well, but I couldn't. It's shocking. It's rather shocking and it's surprising. So, the questions were easy, I failed. In that case, for emphasis, we must use even though. Even though the questions were easy, I failed. I failed even though the questions were easy. All these two sentences are correct. Again, grammatically, the following sentences are also correct if we use although or though. Although the questions were easy, I failed. Though the questions were easy, I failed. But I'd prefer the first two sentences using even though. Even though the questions were easy, I failed. That means it gives a strength, it gives an emphasis, it upholds the emphasis. Let us see the next example. I had a big lunch, still I feel hungry. It was not expected. I had a big lunch, I had a stomach full of lunch, still I feel hungry. So we should use even though. Grammatically, correct sentences are okay, although can be used or though can be used. But according to the sense of the sentence, we should use even though. Even though I had a big lunch, I feel hungry. I feel hungry even though I had a big lunch. I think you can now understand the difference in the usage of though, although and even though. Watch the video again and again. Again, there is another conjunction of contrast. Very simple. We often use it in the case of compound sentences. That is but. The questions were hard, but I did well. Again, we can say the questions were easy, but I failed. I had a big lunch, but I feel hungry. Contrasting ideas. His father wants him to be a doctor, but he wants to be a singer. All these are compound sentences, but one mistake is often done by the learners. They use though and but in the same sentence. But that cannot be used. That is wrong usage. Though the questions were easy, but I failed. No, here but cannot be used. If we use though, but cannot be used, or if we use but, though cannot be used. So in the same sentence, we cannot use though and but, both. Now, let us enter the domain of despite and in spite of. First of all, we should remember that despite equals to in spite of in meaning. What does the word despite or the phrase in spite of mean? Despite or in spite of means without being affected by the particular factor mentioned. For example, he was ill, he went to school. Generally, as he was ill, he shouldn't have gone to school, but he went to school. So, two contrasting ideas. He was ill, he went to school. So, we can write both the sentences, rather we can join the sentences. Despite being ill or despite his illness, he went to school. So, what is the particular factor? His illness. But the action is not affected. That means his going to school is not affected by his illness. So, to mean that, we can use despite or in spite of. Both of them are used as the preposition. Despite is a preposition, in spite of, you can see it is a prepositional phrase, and prepositions are followed by noun or noun equivalents. So they are followed by, despite or in spite of are followed by noun phrase, either noun phrase or a gerund. That means the ing form of the verb acting as the noun. Now despite and in spite of can be used interchangeably. So in place of despite, we can use in spite of. Again, in place of in spite of, we can use despite. Let us see the examples. Robbie decided to buy a costly car. His wife objected to it. So there are two contrasting ideas. Robbie's decision of buying a costly car that stands in contrast with his wife's objection. So we can write, in spite of his wife's objection, Robbie decided to buy the costly car. Or despite his wife's objection, Robbie decided to buy the costly car. Again, we can use despite or in spite of at the end of the sentences. That means, Robbie decided to buy the costly car in spite of his wife's objection. It can be used. Or Robbie decided to buy the costly car despite his wife's objection. He is a businessman. He never runs after money. Generally, the businessmen run after money, but he doesn't. So these are two contrasting ideas and we can join them. In spite of being a businessman, here being be verb plus ing, it's a gerund. In spite of being a businessman, he never runs after money. Or despite being a businessman, he never runs after money. Tom's father wants him to be a doctor. He is determined to be a singer. Now here, we cannot directly use in spite of or despite. So, I have made the sentence, in spite of the fact that Tom's father wants him to be a doctor, he is determined to be a singer. Or despite the fact that Tom's father wants him to be a doctor, he is determined to be a singer. Sometimes I find the learners make a mistake. They use of after despite, and that is a wrong usage. That must not be done. Never use of after despite. We should remember that in spite of means despite. So after despite, we cannot use of. Now, another word of contrast, that is however. It's a different type of word denoting contrast. However is used to mark a contrasting idea. It is used in the second sentence. So, as to denote a contrasting idea, we cannot use however to join with another sentence. It is used in a separate sentence, and however is very much formal. It helps in stating the contrasting idea with emphasis. It can be used at the beginning, the middle, or at the end of the sentence. We can use it at the beginning, the middle, or the end of the sentence. Now, for examples, the unemployment problem is on the rise. Perhaps it was published in a newspaper. The unemployment problem is on the rise. And we can say, however, the government claims it to be an allegation. The government strongly denies it. So the emphasis has been filled with the conjunction however. The unemployment problem is on the rise. However, the government claims it to be an allegation. Again, this very however can be used within the sentence. The unemployment problem is on the rise. The government, however, claims it to be an allegation. We can use it in this way. Again, the unemployment problem is on the rise. The government claims it to be an allegation, however. So, however can be used in a separate sentence in the second contrasting idea. Now, all at a glance, we have seen but, though, although, even though, however, in spite of, despite. I have taken a pair of sentences. I looked for the book everywhere. I couldn't find it. These two sentences stand in contrast to each other. Because I looked for the book everywhere, but I couldn't find it. So the easiest way to join is using but. By using but. I looked for the book everywhere, but I couldn't find it. Again, we can use though here. Though I looked for the book everywhere, I couldn't find it. Again, we can say, I couldn't find the book, although I looked for it everywhere. I couldn't find the book. If I want to give emphasis, even though I looked for it everywhere, now I am annoyed. I couldn't find the book, even though I looked for it everywhere. So for the sake of emphasis, even though has been used. I looked for the book everywhere. Stop. Now the second contrasting idea, however, I couldn't find it. Again, I could have said, I looked for the book everywhere. However, couldn't find it. Or I could have said, I looked for the book everywhere. I couldn't find it. However, it's out and out formal. I couldn't find the book. I looked for it everywhere, though. This though that is used at the end of the sentence, it is out and out informal. It is used in the spoken language. Now we can use in spite of or despite. In spite of looking for the book everywhere, I couldn't find it. Again, we can say in place of in spite of, we can use despite. Despite looking for the book everywhere, I couldn't find it. So I think it is very much clear to you now how we can use but, though, although, even though, however, in spite of, despite, all these words of contrast. And if you find any sort of difficulty, please watch the video again and again. And if my channel proves to be helpful to you, please subscribe to it and press the bell icon to be notified whenever I upload any video. Our next lesson is on types of sentence on the basis of structure. There are 4 types of sentences, if not 3: simple, complex, compound, and there is another kind of sentence that is compound complex sentence. So let's call it a day now. Thank you.